everyone, and welcome back to another podcast, Making a Difference in Mental Health. I'm your host, Danielle Young, with my co-host, Wendy Grier. We are wrapping up our series on resources and information for the community in regards to mental health. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Mrs. Tanya King-Wagner. She's a licensed independent clinical social worker and trainer for the Child and Family Services Agency located in Washington, D.C. And she also has her own private practice called Rivers of Healing. Thank you for coming today, Tanya. But before we get started, I always have to say hey to my co-host. Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
Hey, Danielle, how are you? I'm doing really great. I'm glad today is Friday. It's been one of those weeks, right?
Yeah, definitely has.
So very excited to hear your special guest today, Tanya. Interview her and ask her questions. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thanks to the whole Advanced Behavioral Health team for having me here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'm very excited today. This is actually one of my very special friends. She is definitely like a sister to me, and many times she has guided me through the clinical world. So Tanya, we're just going to have a conversation with you today. For our audience, we really want our audience to know a little bit about your background. We gave you an introduction in the beginning about working for Cfsa and having your own private practice. But can you tell us about your background and how did you get started in the mental health profession?
Okay, thank you so much. A little bit about me. I have a background, of course, in social work and decided to kind of change my track from teaching into social work when I was in college. And I'm really happy that I wound up in the field. And so over the years, I've really started out in child welfare and have been able to see myself just do a lot of part-time contracting from a clinical perspective and doing mental health therapy with children and families. And then from there, I spent a few years in doing juvenile justice work, and that was really fulfilling. I think every system that you work in has its needs, and sometimes you're called to serve longer than other times. And that really propelled me into going back actually into child welfare and working with my fellow colleagues, other social workers, from a clinical perspective, but more so really being focused on helping people to making sure that they had the skills they need to be social workers. And so I've kind of been in the training realm now of my career for the last almost about 7 years now. And then after I transitioned from juvenile justice back to child welfare, I decided, you know what, with all of the experiences that I've had and the people that I work with, it's just that time to really start working on my own private practice. And so that's what I've been doing over the last 3 years. And so I do run a private practice at this time. It is called Rivers of Healing, as you said. And we have a few team members and things of that nature now. And so we still work with children and families in the community, also from a faith-based perspective. So that's kind of what I've been up to over the last few years.
Absolutely. You know, Wendy also has a background in child welfare, so you two could actually just talk for a long time.
All right, Wendy, I salute you, my fellows.
Had a long background, about 30 years in child welfare, and worked in different areas in child welfare, but the core work is always children and families. And this podcast that we're doing for the month of October in terms of resources, Danielle and I wanted to give a little bit of space to working with women and working with women. And you have a private practice. We work with children and families as well. And coming from a child welfare background, the core person or adult that we would work with, of course, was the mother, the parent, woman. And so I'm curious to know, in your private practice, what are some of the themes that you focus on or you see for women coming to you for service?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the women that we work with are really strong women. They're women who sometimes are single parent moms. They're very accomplished in their careers, and they're just having difficulty managing all of these pieces, and many times just feeling kind of overwhelmed and anxious and just needing a voice of support from another fellow woman to encourage them, to let them know that they're on the right track and they're human. And it takes a lot it takes a village to raise a child, so to speak. And so I think a lot of the women that we see really need that encouragement to know that they're on the right track, to know that someone else sees the hard work that they're doing when they're having to raise their children and just going about their careers and really trying to get to the next level of their lives, whatever level that is. So that's probably what I'll say, what I've seen so far. It's just women who just need support, emotional support and encouragement as they go through their journey.
Absolutely. Your thoughts, Danielle?
Well, I appreciate that we're having this particular episode focusing on women who may have or wear a number of hats. And this idea that we don't, or what we do sometimes is we do wear a mask, or sometimes we have to, be the mother and the cook and the cleaner and the worker and the, balancing the checkbook and the bill payer. And even if there is a male in the home, or if this, as far as a traditional construct of what the home would look like. But sometimes as a woman, we do carry it all. And sometimes we don't ask for help, or sometimes we don't feel that asking for help is the right thing to do, or maybe it's selfish in a way. And I do appreciate the fact that, Tanya, you being here today and just reflecting on one demographic of clients that you work with is to empower them and to build them up, empower us and build us up, to let us know that it is okay to be able to take off those hats, sit down, and just have an honest discussion, an open discussion, and even the vulnerability of it all to say, hey, I'm not feeling I'm not feeling the way that I should feel based on what society says, or based on what it looks like on TV, or this cookie cutter way of how women should be, and allowing women to be able to just express themselves. So those are my thoughts so far.
I was just also going to say, Wendy, to answer just another footnote to that. I'm also seeing a lot of women who have had previous history of trauma within the COVID period that we've been in. There's so much that's been going on, but I think over the course of this time, people have been really looking to get healing from previous traumas that they never addressed, and just have kind of gone on, which many of us have had to do from time to time, compartmentalize things just so that we can make it through. So we've had a lot of women actually, which is awesome. I think dealing with trauma is a really tough thing to do, but they've been really coming forward to say, hey, listen, I want to get to the next level of my life. And I think if I deal with some of these hurts and pains from childhood or other areas, even in the workforce, addressing issues from there, I'll be able to get to the next step, whatever that step looks like for them. So that's also something I would say that I've been seeing as well.
We saw that in our practice too. I think COVID just triggered everybody's past trauma. We saw it with our kids who we've been serving, who have had, slight symptoms or no symptoms at all. And this just became symptomatic this entire year, mainly on anxiety and stress and depression, those kinds of things. So it's nice that it's a parallel universe, that you're treating women who are now, took that opportunity to say, okay, let me tackle, my trauma. We had a guest on earlier who spoke about just the rise in domestic violence and the fear around, child abuse and neglect, because there were no eyes on these kids because everybody was home distance learning. So the stress and the anxiety rose this year because of COVID as well. And just being in the house together and not being able to get out just triggered all sorts of things. So that's great that in your practice, you're seeing women now tackle trauma work. And that is very, very, very hard work. We try to teach our kids in our practice the same things. Like, okay, now's the time to learn new coping skills, figure out things so that you can get through this and get through other things that occur in your life as well. So I thank you for that, Tanya. That is a very good point.
No problem.
And, Tanya, too, as Wendy has said, and you said, these COVID symptoms, these things that have appeared otherwise, which would not have appeared prior to COVID or pre-COVID. A lot of the women that we probably all as clinicians, we might see, as it's already been mentioned, either the rise of anxiety or just the fact that their daily routine of what they already have has changed because of this acute trauma that we all have experienced. But also, I like the fact that you brought up just talking about doing the trauma work, trauma-informed work, the TFCBT type focuses of practice that we may do with some of our female clients or female identifying clients. Tanya, now here's the thing. We are all on here, women who are all professional, and we all have to figure out how are we balancing it all? How are we doing this? How are we able to balance the demands of life and of work and of therapy and being able to be the best clinician that we can for our clients and the best wife or the best mother or the best partner, the best coworker, sister, you know, for those in our lives? Tanya, how do you, as a professional woman who's balancing a number of different hats from a professional space, as a trainer, as a social worker, as a therapist, having your own practice, having, you know, your family and running your home, how do you balance it all? And then can you kind of reflect on maybe what are some of the traps, or maybe what are some of the things that women kind of get stuck in the balance stage of life?
Absolutely. That's a great question. You know what? I will say that balancing life and being an adult is an evolutionary process.
I like that. I like that, Tanya.
Because I think in some seasons we do really good, whatever good is, I guess. And in others, we don't feel like we did so great. But one of the things I will say that I'm doing now to balance is I'm really trying to honor how I feel. I'm trying to honor how I feel. And that's tough in society because you don't always feel like you get a chance to do that because we're social workers by nature. The code says, you know, the duty of service, it's supposed to be beyond your own. You know, it's not always going to look like what you want it to look like. You're supposed to kind of pour out into people constantly. And so I think we get caught up in that in different areas of our lives. And so just honoring myself. And if I'm hearing how I feel, you feel tired today, you haven't gotten enough rest today, this has been a long week for you, you haven't done anything nice for yourself lately, you're not saying anything nice to yourself, you're talking really negative about that. And those are some of the things that I do sometimes actually now. That's what it looks like for me to kind of honor myself, just kind of asking myself those questions. And from there, if I'm honest, then I'll set some better boundaries for myself. That means I can set a boundary to make sure I get myself a little bit more rest or to see myself take that time out for myself. Also to ask for help. Many of us do not ask.
That's a big one. That's
a good one.
Asking for help. So I think it stems from just honoring yourself. For me, I've been just trying to practice that a little bit more. And as I do that, I do have a stronger sense of relief from time to time. I think where people get trapped, I know I've gotten trapped in here, is just unrealistic expectations. I think a lot of this stuff starts in our mind. And I've seen so many women, when we're just powerhouses, women are just awesome. Like, we do everything. You name something and a woman can do it, okay? So when you're used to being a powerhouse, you know, Wendy, like, and people call on you, people in your community, like, they look for you to show up. They know Wendy has the answer. They know Danielle can do a podcast and put a video together. And so you just get used to that. But sometimes we set unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Based off the need that somebody's like, well, no, I have to be there. I have to do this if I don't do this. And then kind of get caught in that rigid place where it's like, there is no real have to for anything unless it's basic needs, food, shelter, and clothing. And so, you know, just kind of really thinking about that. And so that trap is really just unrealistic expectations, I think, sometimes. And based on whatever we expect, it does drive how we respond to others and what we do. So I would encourage people to just think about what are your expectations? Are they too high in this season? Maybe today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe today. So just something to think about.
I so appreciate that, Tanya, because sometimes I say to myself, wow, do I have like social workers stamped across my forehead that only other people can see and it's invisible to me or on my back? Because you're right, we get trapped in, people coming up to us and talking to us and asking us questions and asking for help. And we just serve. That's how we were trained. We just automatically do it. So it's funny. It's just a little joke I say to myself. I must have social worker stamped there today because someone felt comfortable enough, complete stranger, by the way, to come up and ask me for help. And of course, I do it. I give the help, but I giggle to myself like this is my incognito social work day.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of reiterate for our audience, you said something really great that you do that, I want to get in the practice of this. And I want to encourage our audience, especially our women on today, the powerhouses that you say, to try to honor how you feel. And what I really heard was just increasing also positive self-talk to yourself, extending a little bit of grace to yourself. But you also said setting boundaries, which actually does help you and others in the long run when you know your limit and that it is okay.
Absolutely.
That's okay. Yeah. This is a great conversation. Wendy, what are any more questions that you have for Tanya here today?
Sure. I just wanted to make one final comment. I love the way you described it as an evolutionary process. And I think the older you get, the easier it becomes to slow down and honor yourself and say how you feel. When you're young, it's, you don't have the maturity, you don't have the experiences, but as you get older, I find myself now in my 50s, no, and I don't have to give you an explanation. I am okay. And so I think it just, it takes time and it takes practice, but it's a very, very solid point that women need to, every now and then pause, who are working and have families and are just doing everything and are powerhouses, to just take a second and, do a self-inventory and take care of themselves. So with that, I want to change our conversation just a little bit. So, in the news, there's just been lots of Me Too movement talk. And lately, women have been coming forward in the athletic realm and in the entertainment realm, business professionals, talking about mental health and talking about the pressures that come with their profession to just perform on cue all the time, and how social media will drag them, the media in general will drag them when they start to set boundaries for themselves. So have you come across anything like that in your practice at all, Tanya?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of the women that we serve, and I will say, so I have a lot of my clients are just powerhouses, so they're doing some awesome things in the community. But it kind of goes back to just being able to advocate for yourself and standing up. And I think when you're pushing the envelope and when you really start setting boundaries, people do get upset because they've just been used to you allowing them to treat you a certain way. I will say, I think it takes a lot of courage to challenge the status quo. A lot of times we say, do it, speak up. And, this person can't do this to you and you should tell them this and that. But it takes a lot of courage. And sometimes, honestly, Wendy, there's a lot of backlash that comes from this, and I would tell, for a lot of my clients that I've worked with who've had to kind of deal with that, it does take courage, it takes strength, and it takes a support system to help you maneuver through that, for sure. So I think that these are some of the things that we also forget in the season that we're living in now. In these times, more people are coming forward. Women are pushing the envelope. We're pushing the glass ceiling. I mean, right now, women entrepreneurs are leading in the United States of America. And so more women are going to college. More women are just doing it.
Yes, we're doing it big time.
Yes, we are. So I think we're going to see a lot of these things. What I think is important, though, is as we see people coming forward to really support them and see, do they have the systems in place emotionally and physically to support whatever they're going to be challenging, because it's going to be difficult sometimes. And I think that's an important piece that sometimes we miss. We see the people you know, the leader of the Me Too movement. And it's like, I can only imagine what she has to deal with sometimes on an emotional level, just leading that charge. So definitely something for us to think about.
Right. I think we're in a movement. I don't think this is going away. And a lot of women are starting to rally around each other and provide each other with the support, because, you know, it takes that one brave soul to take that step. And then everybody else takes a deep breath and says, yes, I can do it too. So it's fun to watch. I'm proud of us as women to be able to, you know, push these boundaries and make a stand for ourselves. So it's some good things.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Tanya, you kind of answered our next question when it comes to advocating for ourselves. And, you know, speaking about certain rights, even if we could get a little bit deeper about maybe just exploring some of the rights that we have. But before we get to that, just wanted to also make a comment about what we saw in the Olympics this past year. And some of our other episodes, even Hollywood keeps creeping in and you know, celebrity keeps creeping into our podcast. But, you know, we saw this with Simone Biles, and we saw this with Naomi Osaka, and we saw this with a couple of other female athletes that have said, hey, you know, I need to put my mental health first. And like you said, sometimes that demand and pushing against the status quo, it's not going to feel good. It's not going to even look good. And we saw that firsthand in the media when these women said, listen, I'm experiencing anxiety or I'm experiencing depression. I need some time off. You know, I'm under this microscope or I'm under this, you know, these big lights, and it is a lot of pressure. And I also find it interesting that people are shunned, especially women, to take care of your mental health. And so when you think about that, and even for our audience and the women that are listening today, like I said, you went through some things about advocating, but what are maybe some things, if you have any resources or thoughts about even women's rights when it comes to speaking up either for mental health, or, you know, what are some codes or what are some ethics or what are some things that our audience needs to be aware of when it comes to standing up for your right as well as securing your mental health?
Absolutely. You know, I think one of the things that before we go to advocate, we really have to sit down and really kind of talk with ourselves. Again, it goes back to honor for me, honoring yourself and honoring how you feel. A lot of times people don't come forward to discuss any type of abuse situation or maltreatment or someone taking advantage or not being paid the same wage, because we're always thinking about how someone else is going to feel about what we say. We're not really thinking, we don't spend the time to think about, well, how am I going to feel if I don't say something continuously? And so it always ends up being about the other people. And that's what stops us a lot of times. And then the backlash. And once we start thinking about everybody else, we just stop. And we just keep taking whatever that treatment is. But if we slow down a little bit and really start to honor ourselves, listen to how we feel, it can lead us to saying, maybe even developing a plan. And from there, you might be able to even get some resources, rally together your emotional support, and just knowing whatever it is that you need to say and advocate for yourself or for someone else about, you'll really be maybe in a more solid place, hopefully, to receive that some support. I would also say that sometimes the support is, you know, it's not conventional. It could be from your therapist. It could be from a treatment team. Some people live lives where they don't have a lot of people in their corner to talk with. So we don't want to just make it seem like everyone has this major support of people rallying. Sometimes your own family and friends will say, well, why did you do that? It didn't seem like a big deal to me. You know, so I think honoring yourself, having those conversations, developing some form of a plan, seeking resources that are unconventional. And then lastly, what I would say about rights is knowledge is power. You know, we really have to get to a place where we're knowledgeable about what the law and the pieces of the law are saying about how you're supposed to treat me and what you're supposed to do. And when you're seeking out resources from a therapist, I think it's important for them to help lead you that way as well. Well, what are we really seeing about what these regulations say? Because the Code of Ethics says for us, Someone is not supposed to treat you that way. I'm not supposed to treat you that way. This is what HIPAA is saying about your rights to this and that. And so you're going to need an ally to help walk you through that piece. So I think just informed consent for me is the biggest thing. Whatever it is, do I know enough about it? Do I know what the law is saying? And I'm prefacing it that way because there's so many issues that we could place on the table. But what do I know about the law saying? And then what are my choices? And are my rights being violated? And if so, what can I do about that? And I think that helps us to really know how to move forward and what resources to kind of pull into play, because some things you might have national resources behind you, Rainbow Coalition, the NAACP, women's rights are different organizations that support women, or special populations like the LGBTQ plus population. So you really need to know. And I think it's hard to do that when you don't have enough emotional support around you to help give you information about what's out there, what you can benefit from. So I think just starting that process again with honoring yourself, and then I believe it will open up the door for information about rights, regulations, and things that can support you as you continue to advocate for yourself.
And one more question, Tanya, before I swing it over to Wendy. Would you happen to at least have resources at CFSA, or maybe could you just kind of plug the agency's website, or maybe something that women could be referred to, whether it's single women, whether they're single mothers or mothers in need? And then you can also plug Rivers of Healing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Rivers of Healing, we definitely are in the community. A lot of the services that we're providing currently are virtual. One of the things that I would say too, when you think about CFSA, Child and Family Services Agency, there are a lot of resources that can be given to families and mothers that you don't necessarily have to have an open child welfare case. You can literally call the hotline. I believe in Maryland, it's 301-909-2450. And in the District of Columbia, it is 202-671-SAFE. And if you call those numbers, they have what's called information and referral. So maybe something's going on in your life, you feel like you need more support. There's no safety issues necessarily present, but you do feel like you want to talk to someone that can help you advocate for yourself, or you feel like you want to work on some mental health concerns, whatever it is, they have what's information and referral. So they can link you to those organizations that would not require you to have an open case with them. And so that you can get filtered into the community to somebody that will be able to help you wherever you are. So that's what I would probably say is probably one of the biggest benefits that we don't necessarily know exists, is that major systems have great referrals. And sometimes we're not tapping into that because we think that that's only for a specific population, when in fact they are there to help support the community as well.
Well, Tanya, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Danielle and I could just go on and on and on and on, because we are talking about women who are professionals, women who are mothers and daughters and everyday people, and giving them, I hope, our audience members, great tips to take away from this podcast today in terms of what it's like to be a woman, how to advocate for yourself, the resources you mentioned, the hotlines in DC and PG County, your private practice, River of Healing that works directly in the community. So this has just been a fabulous conversation. We will definitely have to have you back when we talk some more about women topics. But one of the things Danielle and I like to do is, before we end with a guest, we like to find out if there's some positive tips or things that we can leave with our audience as well, besides the information, of course, that you just gave us, but just things that women can do to maintain the balance between work-life balance, how they can recognize when they need to take a break and slow down, but at the same time, rev it up and keep it going for their own business or whatever they're doing in their lives that is satisfying to them. What would you say to women? How do you balance that out?
Well, you know what? I would say? A lot of times I think we're waiting for a moment to happen. when in reality, we need to seize the moment. This life that we're living in requires intentionality. You have to be intentional about everything that you do. And so we see the people that we, like Oprah and some of, Brene Brown, these people are being intentional about their life. They're taking time to schedule things for themselves. And let's be honest, if you don't schedule a hair appointment, your hair won't get done. If you don't schedule a nail appointment, it won't get done. Teaches you intentionality, right? And so sometimes you even have to be intentional about thinking, spending time with yourself. And you say, you know what, this weekend, I've already had a tough week. This Saturday, I really need to lay low. Friends have been calling me. I'm going to let them know I'm okay. But I really have to do a little bit of processing, some journaling, something, because a lot's been going on with me. And so that needs to be intentional. With everything that women have to balance, there's always something that's on our list of tasks to do's. And so we need to be on that list. As intentional as we are about everyone else and everybody else's priorities, put yourself on that list and start scheduling yourself. Because if you don't do that, you just will be burnt out. So I think just intentionality, not waiting for a moment in time that we're going to feel relief or release, but really scheduling these moments in our lives. And what that says is that I love myself. I love myself enough to schedule. I love myself enough to hear what is concerning me about what's going on. I love myself enough to know when I'm thirsty, when I'm hungry, when I'm tired, when I'm sleepy. And that repetitively doing that, I believe that you will develop a habit of balance because you're always included in your own priority list.
Right. I think it's really giving yourself permission to make yourself a priority.
That's right.
To me, it's that simple. Like, it's okay to put yourself at number one for a minute or two.
Absolutely.
So that you can, recharge and then be that powerhouse. I love that term for us. That powerhouse that you have always been with your family, with your work life, friends, everything. So, Danielle?
Let me just say this. First of all, Tanya, we love self-care over here. So Wendy and I we'll talk offline sometimes about, getting ourselves massages or getting our nails done, those types of things that you said. Life requires intentionality, even down to some of the smaller, simpler details for ourselves. We give so much and so big to everyone else. Sometimes it's the small things. And as Wendy said, give yourself permission to be okay with being number one.
Absolutely.
Not just one time, maybe 2 or 3 times. Because my reality is that I'm no good to anybody else if I'm not good to myself first.
Absolutely.
And so I just want to make one last comment before we swing it over to Wendy. I even feel that the tone of this particular podcast has been a little bit different because I feel like we're speaking to women and we're speaking our own language. We've had guys on. We've had some, some really good, strong, powerful men and we had a series on Black males, and we had some men who also advocate in the community. But I just feel this tone is a little bit different. We're speaking to the women out there to say it's okay to advocate for yourself, to petition yourself for self-care, to put yourself first. And all of that requires intentionality. Absolutely. And so, Wendy, I'm going to turn it over to you. First, thank you, Tanya, so much for participating in this podcast. I'm going to turn it over to Wendy for just her last thoughts. And then, Wendy, we're wrapping up the series. Just let everybody know what we got coming up next.
Sure will, Danielle. So, Tanya, again, thank you for taking time out in your busy schedule to join us and have this discussion about us, women. We haven't had a chance to do that. We've focused on children and men. And men don't get enough love either. So we were happy to do it. And we did do a whole series on self-care. So Danielle wasn't lying. We talked a lot about what we do in terms of self-care. And we had other guests that came on because we do think that is a very important part of your life. And it goes what we were saying today about, making yourself a priority and honoring yourself and, slowing down when your body's telling you to slow down and pause when you need to pause and being okay with it. And so we want women to understand it is okay to have those moments and have more of those moments. And then you're more effective at work and with your family and friends and so forth. So Danielle and I have, I guess, done how many episodes? Probably about 17.
At this point, Wendy, I think we have reached, for our final episode, it will actually be either 19 or 20.
Oh, wow. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you. Danielle and I started this podcast just for the reason of destigmatizing mental health. And this episode today was very important because we were talking about women and giving women permission to slow down and permission to be number one. And it's okay to address your mental health needs if you're depressed or sad. I think the biggest thing, Tanya, you said, we as social workers never do it, but you need to do it. And that's to ask for help when you need help. So anybody who needs help needs to ask for help. So this was right in alignment with what our vision is about this podcast. We want to have these conversations. We want our audience to listen to these conversations and take things away, take knowledge away, and understand that, mental health is like physical health. It's all important, and you have to take care of it, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. So we appreciate you. We are happy that you're able to join us and that we've made a new partnership with you. It's great. So coming up, Danielle and I have the daunting task of summarizing our first year doing the podcast. So our next episode will be a summation of everyone we interviewed for season 1, and we're going to pick out the highlights of each interview, and hopefully the audience again will have a good takeaway of information and knowledge, and will join us as we move into our second season. So I'm excited. Danielle, are you ready?
I am ready. Season 1 is almost done. I believe, Tanya, you're our last guest for season 1 before we do our wrap up. So this is exciting, so exciting. Audience, thank you so much for sticking with us throughout the entire series and season. My name is Danielle Young with my co-host Wendy Grier. This is Making a Difference in Mental Health, where we're always striving to make a difference in mental health. We will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.